Do you feel like you got access to healthy support and tools as you changed from one life stage to the next? Rites of passage is what we're talking about on today's show. Hello, Anna. How are you?
I'm good, Alex. I'm here on a rainy day up in Byron Bay, but I'm very good.
Yes, unfortunately, well, rain is so awesome and so shit sometimes. It can really be both. I have felt the brunt of awful mold affected illness, as many of our listeners know. So it's not my favorite thing these days, but I totally recognize it, of course, as the magic that it is too. And I hope it's more magical than shit for you.
Thank you.
Um, we are talking about rites of passage today, and I want to start by uh, having you show us, sort of explain to us the significance of rites of passage, the normality of rites of passage for most cultures around the world, for most of human existence, and how odd it is that we, in many modern circumstances, don't actually have them anymore. And what the impact of that is. I mean, that's a 3-day seminar question in itself. I get that. But just to paint the picture about the broad theme of what we're talking about.
Sure. Well, first of all, a rite of passage is an event that transforms us and it takes us from one stage in life to the next. And the one that I've been very interested in for many years is a child becoming a young adult. And how we think as a child and how we think as a young adult is completely different. And so communities created rites of passage to help the transition, to create the transition from child who predominantly thinks about themselves and fun and all the things that children think about, to a young adult who's starting to realize that it's not just about me. I'm part of a community and I have a role within the community, and what do I want to be doing with my life, and how am I going to approach relationships? So, it's a very different way of being. And they created rites of passage to not only facilitate the shift from child to young adult, but also from young adult to, let's say, parent, or from a parent to grandparent or elder, or even dying is a rite of passage. So all of these marriage is a rite of passage. All of these key events in a person's life, it's like we're moving up a staircase, and each step is a different stage and a different way of thinking. And when that is facilitated in a good way, then it really supports the person going through that rite of passage. Now, when it's not facilitated and we just ignore it, it happens in very unhealthy ways often. So for a lot of people, their transition from child to adult is really one of the worst times in their life. It can happen through an accident. It can happen through getting in trouble with the police. It can happen through a bad injury that results from them doing something stupid. It can happen through early pregnancies. It can happen through unhealthy sexual activities. But all of these unhealthy events then actually create a wounding in a person. And in my work as a doctor, I found that much of the work I was doing was with older people who had addictions, and those addictions were trying to deal with issues that started when they were young, and actually through unhealthy rites of passage.
And so, Arne, are you saying that unhealthy rites of passage are almost like maskings, like almost numbing from like not being able to or not being shown how we're moving through to a new stage, and therefore kind of almost inadvertently creating events that
Well,
catapult us unhealthily into the
that's
next
right. We are
stage?
all going to move up this staircase.
It's happening no matter what.
It happens no matter what. We all become eventually adults. Many of us become eventually parents. Not all. We don't have to, but we all move up in our work responsibilities. We all get older. We all eventually die, and we will move up the ladder. But a lot of people, I worked as a doctor for so many years, and I saw so many parents who talked about when they became a parent, what a struggle it was, how they didn't have any idea what was going to happen, how they weren't supported. How many people who are becoming what should be elders who are really struggling with that and feeling discarded and invisible and shame around getting older. When you sort of start looking into it, the majority of life changes that happen for so many people are managed about as badly as they could possibly be managed. And that creates a lot of wounding. But wait, there's more. Imagine if a child who thinks they're the center of the universe, it's all about me, I'm the most important person, I do everything I can to get what I want, which is normal in a child. Imagine if that child never went through a rite of passage and then ended up becoming, I don't know, the leader of one of the major countries in the world and was able to start wars and make huge policies. Imagine if you married that person. Imagine if that person became the head of a big company or the head of a family and they're still thinking like a child, where it's all about me, I'm the most important person, I do what benefits me the most, not what actually benefits my community. And I actually think that's what's happening. I think we live in a world that's actually very adolescent, very childish, and our priorities are still around childish things.
Wow. My mind has gone straight to the escalation of domestic violence in our country. I don't know other countries, but and the tragedy that happened at our school last year with one of our teachers being murdered by a colleague, and thinking, God, that's a dummy spit moment where you couldn't have the girl.
Right. It is exactly right. And if we can talk about it,
I think we have to. That's the thing.
Well, I agree. I see 6-year-olds in the supermarket on the ground, rolling around, trying to kick their mother, saying, I hate you. You're the worst person in the world. I want my lollipop. And, having a temper tantrum. Now, when a 6-year-old does that, that's okay. It's kind of normal. All of our 6-year-olds have had that dummy spit. But you get an adult man who doesn't get what he wants and still thinks it's okay to kick, throw around, hit people, abuse people, be violent. That is domestic violence. Pure and simple. And it's so not okay. It is completely childish, inappropriate behavior. And that's someone who's never been through a healthy rite of passage. So as men, for example, I'm allowed to be angry, but I have to manage that anger. I'm not allowed to be physically, emotionally, or verbally abusive to someone, because that is domestic violence. And so when we don't have rites of passage, they're the adults who, when they become leaders, take everything for themselves. They're the adults who, when there's a disagreement, think that it's okay to go to war. It's all there.
It's all there. Wow. Okay.
So adults, by the way, they're the adults who, when something goes wrong that they've been involved in, will lie and deny it to try and cover it up.
I could literally list the many people I've studied in history and a political science degree. As you say that, you can, it's spot the person who didn't get to go through the rites of passage the proper way. Wow. So we started on a really light topic there, light note. And I'd like to ask you then, how does one go from being a doctor as a GP, seeing person after person? Did you start thinking of ways to connect with those people, to support them and provide resources in the context of being a GP? Or is that when you started to see, I think I've actually just been shown a bigger piece of work as to why I'm here?
Yeah, look, I think there's multiple things. I, as a GP, became fascinated with people and all the stories I was hearing. It's a very privileged place, the doctor's chair, because people tell you their story and hopefully they tell you their truth. They usually do. And that was when I first realized that so many of the elder people's problems started when they were young. That became very obvious. Especially when I talk to the really old people and ask them what they would do differently, or finding out about their life stories, was incredible. And then I also worked in emergency medicine for 15 years. And I saw in the emergency room what I call an overrepresentation of teenagers. How many young people were coming in who'd done something like steal their parents' car, or gone on schoolies and gotten drunk and had sex for the first time in their life with someone they'd never met before that they were going to regret for the rest of their lives, or gotten in a fight, or all these different things. I'm like, what is going on? And it was terrible. And I realized they were trying to do the things of adults. They were trying to be grown up, but with no boundaries, with no one there supporting, watching them, taking them through it. And I was like, wow, they're trying to make themselves adults, but it's just completely unsupervised, unfacilitated. And about the same time, I went on my first men's retreat. This is like 1993. It's over 30 years ago. And I found that all the men were basically dealing with the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
They all were, I identified 5 issues. I'll just race through them.
Yeah.
One is unresolved stuff with their own fathers. Even if their fathers were dead, they were still trying to get approval from their fathers through their work, through their possessions, through whatever. That was the first one. The second one was, when am I going to feel like a man, actually feel like a man instead of a boy in a man's body? The third one is, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? I know it's not what I'm doing, but I don't know what it is. The fourth one was, how in the world do I be in a healthy relationship? Because no one's ever taught me and I'm just lost. And the fifth one was, if I'm a father, how do I be a good father?
Yeah.
And that's when I first started hearing about rites of passage and investigated rites of passage, and found out that every Indigenous community would always create a rite of passage for the boys becoming young men. And then fast forward a few years, every Indigenous community would always create a rite of passage for girls becoming young women. And then they not only created for that step from child to young adult, they kept creating them through life, so that you were in a cycle of, I spent some time as a child, then I moved to being a young adult. I spent some time as a young adult, then I moved to being in a relationship, let's say. And the rite of passage might be getting married. Then I spend time as a parent with young children. Then I spend time as a parent with grown-up children. That's a different stage. Then maybe I become a grandparent. Then I become an elder in the community. And then I'm passing on. And we can do it so well, but we don't do it at all. We just say, oh, yeah, just work it out as you go.
And do you feel like part of it is actually, and I'm certainly not suggesting people need to move back into traditional faith communities necessarily. One isn't called to do so. But obviously there was, in, say, the Christian faith, there was a big evacuation really from going to church every Sunday. Like, a lot of people just don't do those sorts of things anymore. And these were often places to come and reflect and join as a community and acknowledge and honor different members of the community at different ages and stages. I think of when I was a Catholic, as a teenager, we got confirmed, and that was a moment of reflection. I remember we had to do a lot of journaling and a lot of exploring of ourselves, and like, you take that away from people, and it kind of just gets replaced with a bit of every man and his dog self-help book landscape instead, because
alcohol,
or you're a lucky one if you turned to Oprah in the 90s and all the self-help kind of revolution, I guess. But it's like we don't have a framework for how it needs to look if there isn't a structure that is religious in place.
Correct.
Let's say,
Correct.
or cultural.
Look, the good side of religion is really, it creates community. It actually does acknowledge the stages of life. It creates a support networks. It creates a reflection time. So there is that good. There's a whole nother side to religion, which unfortunately, I don't quite know how to express it, but has caused most people to not want to be involved in active religion. Yes, there is a void. And so then we end up with things like 21st birthdays or 18th birthdays, which should really be a celebration of moving to the next stage in life and everything involved in that, and often end up just being a big piss up where it's about drunk. And look, do you remember how drunk Johnny got he was so drunk that he crashed his car on the way home, and so, which is the worst thing to do. And my work is about, we've really worked hard on identifying the framework, the stages and the elements of a rite of passage, and how we can bring them back in a healthy way. And, starting in schools, and then working in communities and working in businesses. And what I'm finding, and, I've just come back from Europe from a month of doing work there. And I started this work nearly 30 years ago. And when I first started doing it, I'd get 2 people rocking up to my talks or 5 people to a workshop. Now things are booked out.
Yeah.
I did a leadership training in the Czech Republic a few weeks ago with 120 people there, all completely hungry for the work. As we speak, we've got a camp running here on my land with 80 men and boys, a father-son camp. Next month or month after, we'll be having a mother-daughter program and all sorts of other programs. And people are realizing that we need to be acknowledging these different stages of life, and it's completely tied into well-being. At the same time as we're seeing this tragic, unacceptable rise in mental health statistics, a big part of it is that the young ones don't have a healthy sense of belonging. They don't have a sense of purpose and know what their own individual gifts and talents and genius and spirit really is. They are still treated like children, but expected to act like adults. They've lost faith in the elders in the community. No wonder they've got a mental health issue. And we say, oh, we'll fix that. We'll give them medication.
Or we blame it all on tech as a silver bullet
we blame
problem.
it on tech, or we need to get ahead of these issues and go, all right, what could we be doing so that children have a healthy sense of belonging? They have, the critical life skills that they need, like resilience and emotional intelligence, and they go through healthy rites of passage rather than disastrous ones that they've created themselves.
So important. And so where does one start as a parent of, actually, even before then, something that really I remembered very specifically when you were talking about the journey into becoming a parent was just how many appointments and scans and blood tests and chats for the 9 months, well, unfortunately, nearly 10 months in my case, I was pregnant. Yep, it was a long one. But like it was so detailed for this one, unfortunately, again, 3-day event. But then you got the baby.
Yeah.
Where's the detail going into the support of that responsibility and that work and
That's
that
right.
network of
And you just go home.
support? You
just
just go home. I remember just putting him down and thinking, okay, so, and then he started crying half an hour afterwards. I had no idea what to do. I remember it so well.
Yeah.
So it's
We haven't
like,
even mentioned the partners.
no. Oh God, no. Yes, let's
And
not. Yeah.
it's as major a rite of passage as any person will ever go through as having a child. And when it's not managed, it's very, very difficult for a lot of women after the baby's born. And for a lot of the partners who haven't even really thought about it properly, they're still functioning on single man psychology and, thinking, oh, I still want to go out on Saturday night. I still want to get drunk with my mates, as opposed to, hey, I now have a partner and a child, and this is the biggest responsibility I've ever had. And there's no one supporting me, talking to me. So
How do I step up to the plate on that? What does that even look like?
Correct. So this major transition is also not done properly, where it could be done so much better. So, and more and more, what I love is that we're seeing programs that start for pregnant mums and their partners early in the pregnancy, and talking about after, and creating networks and creating support for postpartum care, and bringing the grandparents in as well, who have such an important role to play when they're well utilized. So, yeah, I mean, we could easily do another podcast on how would you do pregnancy, birth, and postpartum 1,000 times better than we do it now.
I'll book you in.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And so knowing that we get to have that chat, because I know there'll be a lot of people very interested in that one, I do then want to focus on the teen to a young adult to a that phase, because we're talking about the anxious generation. We're talking, there's a lot of words being flown around. There's a lot of researchers doing crunching numbers and then coming out with big, bold statements, and then big banning ideas of social media, let's say. And look, I agree with a lot of the sentiment of what we're talking about and how it's impacting our young people. But what we're not talking about is strengthening, building resilience, building knowledge. We're just talking about taking the bad thing away so much. And
Correct.
so, can we talk about that exactly? And maybe I'll take you back to the first father-son camp you ran. Let's go there. And what you started to notice was some of the really magical things that could happen if you did set the stage for healthy transitions.
Yeah. So we ran our first father-son camp in 1993. We took 27 men and boys out in the bush for 3 days. It rained from beginning to end,
Nice.
torrentially. And it was probably the most extraordinary experience I've ever been through in my life, certainly up until that point. And a lot of what we did was pretty simple because we were still very much trying to work it out. But one of the most incredible things we did was we sat every day, man, boy, man, boy, man, boy, around a fire. And some of the boys were with their fathers and about a third or a half of them weren't. And we shared stories.
Yeah.
And we got the men to share stories about when they were the age of the boys. And the first story was about when they were the age of the boys in a relationship they had with their own father.
Mm-hmm.
And about half the men cried because they'd had such an unsatisfactory relationship. And then we said to the boys, if you become a father, what would you like your son or daughter or child to say about you? And what the boy said was extraordinary. And, straight away I could see, wow, we just changed on some level how these boys are going to be if they become fathers. Because, they're thinking about it. Another day, we got the men sharing about their successes and failures. Another day, we talked about relationships, and then we let the boys ask the men any questions they wanted to about sex and making love.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had a panel of men. We had a panel of men, and we had men who'd been born in we had one man who'd been born in the 1930s, other man in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right through. And it was incredible, the questions that the boys asked the men, and beautiful. And that was really powerful. And then the men talked about their experience with addictions. So that was, the sharing of stories was very powerful. The discussions about relationship was very powerful. We got the men and the boys thinking about, what's their vision for 5-7 years from now? How do they want their life to be in 5 or 7 years? What sort of things do they want to be doing? What sort of relationships do they want to be in? Both the boys and the men. And that was very powerful. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And then the last thing we did was we got the boys one at a time sitting on a big rock in front of everyone. And their fathers or the man who'd brought them got up and spoke to the boy and told that boy what they admired about him and what they were proud of and what gifts and talents they saw that they had. And you saw the boys and you saw that, and not only the man who brought them spoke to them, but one or two other men from the group spoke to the boy. And you saw the boys just sort of growing in front of you. It was
Wow.
extraordinary.
Oh, that put a lump in my throat.
Yeah. And these boys, they were like, some of them said to me, I've never had that experience in my life. I just always get told how shit I am. So
All
to
the
be
things you're
actually,
stuffing up on.
to be
Yeah.
seen was incredible. And I knew from that time out in the bush with these men and boys, this was something extraordinary and important. So whilst I was still working as a doctor, I'd still organize and run one or two of these camps a year. And then in 2000, I left being my medical practice, walked away and just worked full-time in setting up rites of passage programs, initially in Australia and then around the world, actually.
Yeah, wow. And have you seen in your travels anywhere that, like, doesn't need this work? Like, wow, that culture's really got it going on and they have these things in place. Are you inspired by anything happening around the world?
Not overly. I
Mm,
think it's lost in there are some indigenous communities who are still doing, and there are definitely some places who are doing good work, but I I think it's coming back, and there's a much greater recognition that we have to be spending time supporting and acknowledging this transition from child to young adult. But not only child to young adult, because if we do that part well, but we don't work with the parents and the elders, then the staircase doesn't work properly.
mm.
Because unfortunately, everybody's trying to stay down the staircase. Everybody wants to be young, to appear young, and so when the young ones start moving up the staircase, that can actually be threatening to the ones who are higher up.
Wow. So
We
we,
need to
we
give them
bring in the
space.
issue with the cult of youth
Correct.
actually
Correct.
preventing this staircase from being climbable.
Correct. So as
Mm,
a child becomes a young adult, their parents need to move up a step.
yeah.
And the older people move up a step into the elder role, because all of those roles are actually really, really important. It's an ecosystem. It's not, you can't just in isolation look at the kids. The problems happening with the kids are also reflected in parents and elders.
Hmm. And so is part of the disconnect then fractured families, both in various separation statistics we could call out, but also international moves. You know, a lot of us aren't even near our elders anymore.
Correct. National, international moves. So the
Mm,
elders, and I'm very interested in the elder place because I've just turned 60 recently. And it's like, oh, this is interesting. I can feel I'm in a different season.
mm,
So I've been very interested in, what does it mean to be an elder, to be a good elder? And it's actually, there's a few things, but it's about very much, it's a mentoring role. It's a letting go. It's definitely not competing with the young ones anymore, but it's being there to support them and answer questions or share stories if they want to know about things. And what's really interesting is the elders have a really important role with the teenagers, and by fulfilling that role, it actually frees up the ones in the middle, the parents, to go out and do their thing.
hmm.
In fact, there's a saying that grandparents and grandchildren have a special bond
Oh,
because
yes.
because they have a common enemy. And when the elders are not present, the parents can't be doing their thing. They're having to look after the kids all the time, and parents are tired and worn out, and the elders are off playing golf or in an RV somewhere driving around drinking white wine at the end of the day,
Mm,
and don't really have a lot of purpose in the same way. But when we have a community, the elders have a really important role, and that role is to look after and to see the young, which the young love, and so that really, and to share their stories with the young, and then the young give energy and purpose to the elders. So
yeah.
it's a really, and frees up the ones in the middle, the parents. So
Hmm.
the whole rites of passage thing and the whole community thing are very inextricably linked. And when we break down the community and don't have rites of passage, we end up with high levels of dysfunction, which is exactly what we're seeing. We end up with leaders who are still acting like children. We end up with children who are lost and have mental health issues. We end up with elders who are either off doing something or at home depressed. It just doesn't function nearly as well. It doesn't function.
Mm. Yeah, it doesn't function. And once we know what we need to function, we can even build that I call it biodiversity because I'm just thinking like a healthy farm needs lots of different plants and animals to be robust.
It does.
And humans are no different. Like we keep
Yeah.
on trying to disconnect ourselves from nature, but really we need polyculture, not monoculture.
Correct. We need polyculture. And then the other thing, if we just address the tech thing for a moment, and everyone's like, oh,
Mm,
it's all about social media and that's what's stuffing everything up. I say, look, we're not going to get rid of tech, and
mm,
tech has a really important role to play in certain areas, but the sort of the antidote to tech is actually the human experiences. So if our young ones, if people of all ages are having genuine human experiences, that balances out all the influence tech have. If there's no human experiences, tech starts running the show and running the world. So if you've got a kid and all they're doing is playing online games, that's a disaster. That kid needs to spend time as well outdoors, in nature, creating things, building things, doing the human experiences. And the most human experiences of all are sharing stories, being in community, and creating and going through rites of passage. So if we can still focus on communities and sharing stories and creating rites of passage, then the influence tech will have will be appropriate and supportive for us to get done what needs to be done, as opposed to tech defining how we spend our lives, which is very different.
Or just being a really shitty replacement for genuine human connection.
Correct. It's about human connection, human experiences. Absolutely.
So good. And so good to different.
I mean, look at this. This is a combination. You're in Sydney, I'm in Byron Bay. This is tech that is allowing us to do this. Instead of the tech, this could be a tech relationship where we're, playing video games, but we're using tech in a healthy way, and we're actually sharing our stories.
Yeah.
And we're building a little mini community between you and me.
Yeah.
So it's and we're getting ideas from it. So it's actually, all of these things, if we use them in a healthy way, and I hope I'll go away from this interview with you uplifted, inspired, excited, and I hope you'll be happy as well. And that's a human interaction using tech.
So far, so good. Don't worry. But I love that that's come up, because I had a psychologist on the show recently who I adore her work. Her business is called, and her practice, Digital Nutrition, thinking about tech as food landscape. And there's ultra processed food that's junk that you don't want to give too much to your body. Don't worry if you go to a party and you have a few chips. It's not a big deal, but let's not make that the 3 meals a day. And I genuinely believe we can extrapolate that idea out and find nourishment from positive technology use.
We are human beings using tech. And the problem is that tech is the current drug.
Yeah.
And for the kids who are unhappy, they just lose themselves in tech. The boys are in there playing violent games. The girls are, they just got the thing there in front of their face the whole time, just swiping, looking at Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever, and thinking, I need to look like one of the Kardashians or someone else.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Major problem.
Just the other summer season, we were all at the beach with family friends that we go to the beach with every single summer. And one of the kids in year 7 was wearing these very crazy nails that she'd had put on. And she was, I think, 12, 13 at the time. And I thought, oh, what's that about? Tell me, is it friends that are doing it? I'm always curious. You got to go and curious rather than that looks awful. What are you doing that at your age? I think curiosity is a really healthy way, because then you get to know where they're coming from and what then the issue is. And it's about needing to look like the superstar on TikTok. And then once you know that, you know what's missing, and then you can actually start to influence what you put there instead. So my next question, I guess, is, help a parent out. If we know there's a problem, but it just feels so big because it is a societal, cross-cultural issue, and we feel almost a bit helpless about where to even get started. What does a day-to-day cultivation of a better way look like in the family unit right now, that we could actually start to say, okay, I'm going to bring a bit of that in. I'm going to consciously talk more about when I was a kid. What are some of the things that really move the needle that you see in that microcosm of a retreat, like a big fireworks change? What does it look like in a more day-to-day way?
Great. Well, let's talk about a family, because yes, you're completely right. We don't want to do a podcast and everyone goes at the end and goes, that was amazing, but what can I do?
Yeah.
We really want people to have things. And I'm happy to provide a couple of resources that you can put on a link so people can actually have them.
That'd be amazing.
we work with a lot of schools, and schools are made up of families. And the
Mm.
sort of thing that we talk about is, okay, what can be done to move families more into a healthy unit, rather than what the research is showing is that the majority of families don't have dinner together anymore.
Mm.
The kids are in their rooms on their computers, dad's home late, mum's doing what she's doing. Yeah, I got to be careful of generalizations here, but
Mm.
what can we do within the family? So we believe that some of the elements of a healthy culture are people who are checking in on each other and sharing stories.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually teach families how to do a check-in. And we say, what about once a week, all have dinner together and actually do a check-in, and here's a check-in. And we provide two different models of check-ins. And when you do a check-in, one person at a time speaks and the rest of the family listens. And the first is rose, thorn, banana peel. So rose is what was the best thing that happened to me this week or today. Thorn, anything difficult. Banana peel, anything unusual that happened. So, my rose would be that we've got this camp going and I'm super excited that there's all those men and boys doing it. My thorn, the difficult thing would be that there's some work stuff that's happening on the land that's turned out a bit complicated, and that's taken a bit of my energy. And my banana peel would be that a little bird flew into the window. I went outside, I was sitting there, I picked it up on my hand, and its partner was sitting there as well. And I picked that one up as well. I've never had anything like this happen to me before. Took them out the front, patted them, talked to them, and they flew off.
Wow, that's a good
So
banana peel.
yeah. And so the whole family goes around, and then you have dinner, then you talk. And we also have a golden check-in, which is a bit more GOLDEN. How am I going overall? What have I been occupied with and doing? What have I liked recently? Anything been difficult recently? What am I excited about for the E? And is there anything I need? And either of those at the beginning of a meal or in the car are just such a really beautiful way of checking in with each other. And it's not just checking in with the kids, it's also checking in with the parents and the grandparents, because we're all part of the unit. And then we encourage families to share stories, parents to share stories about when they were the age of the kids, what they loved doing, what went well, what didn't go well. And we've actually developed parenting strategies. We developed 7 parenting strategies because we find that parents want to be the best parents they can and are hungry for strategies. And I'll send you both the check-ins and the strategies documents.
Amazing.
And it's like making sure that you spend time one-on-one with each of your children, ideally your partner, with no mobile phone or mobile phone turned off, doing something you both enjoy. So however many kids you got, make sure that with each of your kids, you have your one-on-one time with them. And it might be once a day, once a week, once a month, but they know when they're doing it that it's just you and them. And not asking them lots of questions about what's going on in life and what they want to do and what's happening, just spending time and opening. Well, one, it builds relationship, and 2, it creates that safety. So if they want to speak to you, they can. And I could go on about that a lot, but things like that, things like sharing stories, things like when your child mucks up, which they will.
Yep.
You separate the person from the behavior. You don't shame them. Hey, I really love you, but this thing was not okay. Is there anything else going on? Because we also know that very often when kids act out, especially boys, there's something going on for them. And if we just get angry about what's happened, we can miss something a lot more serious that, is going on behind the scenes. So there are 7 strategies that we have, and we'll send them out, and they're, really, really good. Things like that. Yeah. And then it's about education. It's about, letting people know about rites of passage, letting people know where they can access them, whether it's through us or other organizations. And we actually created a program called Transformational Parenting, because it is actually a lifetime journey.
It sure is. And
really
you
is.
mentioned sharing stories about when you were younger. And I know sometimes parents might think, like, I don't want to share about the bad things or the stuff ups because I don't want my kid to turn out the same. Can you speak to that and share how that can actually sometimes end up being the more powerful story that you share?
Oh, look, they need to know that. If we put it,
Mm,
I was perfect, I was always good, then we're not real. It's
mm,
really so important that they know what we struggled with, what didn't go well, how we made mistakes and the consequences of them. That is where so much learning can happen for them. And it makes sense if you think about it. We're not just telling kids, we talk about sharing our greatest successes and our greatest failures.
mm. Yeah.
That's part of life. Failures, challenges are part of life. And I always say to the young ones and anyone, we won't be defined by our challenges. We'll actually be defined by how we manage our challenges, how we
Mm.
deal with them. So when we bring that into the field, we actually see that when something goes wrong, when they muck up, when something happens, it is the most important and powerful learning journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. And another thing I just want to pick up on that you shared was doing something one-on-one with each of your children, uh, and phones off, that you both enjoy. It actually made me think of a personal situation. I'm going to share it because you've inspired me to dig into what I could replace it with. I am a very competitive, good tennis player, and so is my son. And that has been our thing that we do, phones off, enjoy ourselves. And it's not about being attached to accomplishment or what are you doing at school or how can I help you study better at anything. It's not about that stuff. It's just about having fun together with something we love. And I've had this tendon situation that's really just kept me off being able to play. Certainly can't play a competitive match at the moment. Um, and you just saying that made me reflect and made me realize we haven't replaced that with anything in the last few months. And so I'm just sharing that because I really think it's important to, once you know what's important, to keep your eye on it as well. Because I didn't keep
Correct.
my eye on that one. And
Correct.
I now
And the
know,
appropriate thing
okay,
to do may change.
mm-hmm,
Little,
yeah,
the thing may be reading them fairy tales before they go to sleep. When
yeah.
they're 15, they may not want that anymore, you know. But and it's great that you realize that, and you might
Mm,
million things you can do. You might decide to go out for coffee on a Saturday
yeah.
morning, or you might decide to go to the movies once a week and on the way home have dinner and talk about it, or you might play music together, or you might anything. And I used to find with my sons, often it was when we were driving home,
Mm,
looking straight ahead with the music on, then they would ask me something or tell me something, and I'd think, oh,
yeah.
I'm so happy you actually discussed that.
Yeah. The face forward thing is great.
It's
I've
different with everyone.
realized as well. Yeah.
Some people, when their kids are little, have a bath with them once a week and just sit and
Mm,
chill in the bath, or, there's a million ways you can do it.
yeah. Brilliant. Oh, so good. Hopefully it's got everybody thinking. Um, Now we've touched on it briefly, and I want to talk about toxicity in both of the sexes. The toxic need to be, perfect, the explosion of plastic surgery in women and girls, fillers, injectables, and then AI being the extension, that the perfect we're chasing is actually not even human anymore. At least when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, all we had was a bit of thigh gap face Photoshop to worry about trying to live up to. These days, it feels so much more complicated, and we've had some boy examples. So I just want to shift to girls for a minute, growing into women, and some ideas around how to support our girls to actually feel okay to be themselves. That seems to
Oh my
be
God.
the number one challenge for
Yes.
raising girls today.
Yes. I have a big passion around working in a healthy way with girls. And obviously, as a man, I don't do really the direct face-to-face work with the girls, but I'm very involved in creation of programs because, and I work in some of the biggest schools, girls' schools in the country. And my great concern is that the girls are being fed a story from an increasingly younger age about how they're supposed to be, how they're supposed to look, how they're supposed to act.
Mm,
It's not only boys who are watching porn, it's girls as well, and thinking that's what they're supposed to do because that's what they're seeing online. That's where they're getting their sex education from. And and that if they don't look a certain way, they've got a major problem. You know, we talk about toxic masculinity in boys. I talk about toxic perfectionism in girls. And often when something's going wrong with a boy, they'll act out. And when something's going wrong with a girl, they'll look perfect. But inside, there's all this anxiety and angst and everything else that's going on. And the greatest thing for girls to do, it comes back to the rite of passage framework. If we can get them with older women, hearing the older women's stories and hearing what it was like for those women when they were young, and also those older women telling those girls how beautiful and fabulous and wonderful they are, just as they are for themselves. You know, and that's one of the elements of a rite of passage, is acknowledging the gifts, the genius, the spirit of each of the young people, and saying, we actually love you and are proud of you for who you are. This idea that you have to be like someone who's online, we don't buy into that as well at all. Sorry, we think you're amazing as you are, because most, if not every girl is.
And so I'm just going to try and pretend to be a teenage girl for a little sec here and say, but you don't know my life. I have to compete on that level. Otherwise, I fall behind, or, you know, I'm not going to be accepted. And so what do we do in that situation?
Yes, great. It's a great question. And this is about, we have to start early. Once they're in crisis, it's a much harder place to do it. But imagine, and we are involved in programs that do this, where girls sit around, and first of all, we have to create a safe environment for them. If it's not safe, they just won't share and they won't open up. But when you create a safe environment and you have an older woman facilitator, and older can be 25 or 40 or 50, but older than the teenage girls, and get them sharing about what goes on for them and what it's like and what they're worried about. And you know, one of the things is, very quickly the girls will discover that where they think they're the only one struggling, pretty much all the girls are struggling. And pretty much all of them are struggling with the same thing. And then eventually they may even come to the realization that the thing they're struggling with is ridiculous because it's AI generated, or it's completely Photoshopped. So, you know, there are obviously a number of stages, and it's not simple, but creating safe spaces for the girls to be able to share with each other, creating check-ins, hearing stories of older women, changing things like school camps from being just activities-based into really good personal development reflection periods, still with good activities, but, you know, the schools that we're working with are really looking at exactly that question. How do we do this well? How young do we start? It actually, we want to start with the parents when the girls are in kindergarten and prep, and building up those communities and saying, hey, let's think about what messaging, you know, where do the girls get this messaging from in the first place?
Yeah.
It comes from the family. It comes from what they're exposed to. So how could we do that differently and better? How can we start changing the narrative? And then even bringing back 21-year-old women, you know, who've been through a few years ago what these girls were through, and getting them to share their stories and experiences. All of those things are incredibly supportive for the girls. And yes, what we're aiming to do is cultural change, which is not an easy thing to do, but we have to start somewhere. And because I've been involved in this work for 30 years, I've seen the changes that can happen.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen that over a period of time, we can change the narrative, we can change the priorities of people, we can, in fact, you know, create a situation where they go out into the world and they leave school and they're young adults who have a healthy sense of self, know what they're passionate about, know what their core skills are, know also where their challenge areas are, and are actually ready to embrace life, as opposed to going out, you know, believing the story that they were told when they were 11 years old about all these different things.
Yeah, it's huge. And something I'm now thinking about is how important it is for the parents to cross communicate, because you've got these, you know, double mortgage to the hill, working like crazy hours families now just to get by in so many cases. where they're having a hard time just communicating within their family nucleus, let alone making space for socials. Like my childhood, when we had a healthy middle class, is the memory is like parents standing around chatting for hours,
Yeah.
predominantly the mums, I will say, but even a lot more time for a lot more inter-family connection
Yeah. Yeah.
than we have now. And I wonder whether that's one of the big impactors as well, that we're not
Of course it
literally
is.
not cross-pollinating with all the different ages in big, huge get-togethers.
They did research which shows that families who have dinner together 3 or more times a week, the kids do better.
Mm.
Now, I was astonished they did that research because I thought,
Doesn't
doesn't,
everybody?
but they
No,
don't.
they don't. You know, I did a fussy eating course as a health coach, and really just trying to help families break away from ultra processed food. And it was about 10 years ago. And I thought it was just going to be about giving them the language to, okay, little Johnny, this is how we eat, and let's go to the farmer's market together, and just creating new realities, less time in the supermarkets. But actually, one of the most powerful modules was the family table module, where your kids aren't going to eat healthy, varied meals if you're not eating together. So it was coming at it not from the psychological, let's raise healthier kids mentally perspective, but this was about food.
Yeah.
And I could not believe how many families didn't do that. And
Yes.
we had people sharing these moments of success where they had bought their first dining table
Yeah.
because of the course and the importance of family mealtime for impregnating the idea of what a healthy eating landscape looks like. But
Fabulous.
then now with what you're talking about, I mean, we know that that is so much further reaching than whether your kid's going to be a fussy eater or not. It's
Yeah.
literally a blueprint for a healthy, holistic life.
Correct. So the work that we're talking about, we want to start early. Earlier we
Mm,
start, the better. And
yeah.
it actually goes through all the generations, encouraging grandparents to be involved as much as possible in children's lives. And then encouraging grandparents how to be a healthy grandparent, you know,
Oh, can we talk about that?
absolutely.
What's being a healthy grandparent?
Well, spending time,
Mm.
sharing stories, teaching them, not just filling them up with sugar and sticking them in front of the TV. Once again, often all you have to do is think about it for 5 or 10 minutes, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Mm.
You know,
I think my favorite memories of being around my grandma is hearing about what life was like for my grandma when she was little.
there you go.
Mm.
There you go. And that is one of the greatest gifts that she can give you. So stories are always part of rites of passage, but they're used differently at different times. And when kids need to hear the stories, that's how they learn and grow. But
Mm.
elders need to get their stories out.
Mm.
Your grandmother would have enjoyed telling you those stories as much as you would have enjoyed hearing them.
Mm.
This is the thing. And, the grandparents have all this wisdom and knowledge and experience. What are they doing with it? And who better to give it to than their grandchildren and the young?
Hmm. So powerful. I'm a tangential thinker. I'm now thinking of a classroom and teachers who are struggling to control, I put in inverted commas for people who aren't watching, um, uh, kids, and how a bit of vulnerability and a bit of sharing about what being in
Yeah.
a classroom
Yeah.
was like in my day. And the worst thing I ever did in a classroom was, and boy, didn't I get told.
Yeah.
And actually, like, it's almost like the message is rehumanizing and putting a whole bunch more color into living by gathering more stories from everybody we possibly can.
That's right. That is exactly it.
Mm.
All there.
Ah, so good. Thank you so much. Such an enlightening conversation. So much to now. It feels like one of those springboard chats. I'm very much looking forward to our part two, which will be on the transition into parenthood. So we will tee that up for a couple of months' time when you have the time. But I just want to say I really appreciate the work you do. I have followed it for years and to be able to share a small window into that with our audience so that they can start their journey into putting more importance to rites of passage is just, it feels like such a gift to be able to bring people. So thanks.
Right. And for people who are interested, our website, the Rites of Passage Institute.org. Rite spelled R-I-T-E-S. We'd love people to check out. We've got camps for kids anywhere from 7 to 17. We do overnights and weekends for the little ones, father, son, father, daughter, mother, son, mother, daughter. And then we have the teenage ones, which are the father, son, and the mother, son, recognizing that transition to young adult. We have all sorts of resources on the website. We really want to support people to be involved in this work. So hopefully people will come and check it out. And also there are the resources that I am sending you that we can give to parents on check-ins and parenting strategies.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.
I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment-free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.